In a galaxy that is far from Earth, civilizations thrived thanks to technological achievements. These interstellar societies had long outgrown the necessity of crude implements like swords and spears. Their weaponry used electromagnetic energy, plasma ions, and the very fabric of the universe. Of battle were not only incredibly effective, but also represented the development of the idea of using a blade in combat was viewed as ridiculous, bordering on comical, and was only taught in ancient history classes. And dusty galactic armies are the guardians and upholders of this advanced order, according to museums, symbolized the height of this technology, and their arsenals were fueled by reactors that could produce soldiers with precision plasma rifles, which could burn targets at great distances, possessed unfathomable energy. Feudal tossing around pornography, hovering in drones patrolled the area, but personal protection systems made the majority of direct physical attacks impossible. Mechanized suits in the sky equipped with high-energy lasers capable of precisely destroying adversaries on the ground. Enhanced soldiers' power and reflexes through artificial intelligence, giving these armies the idea of power beyond their work. In addition to being out of date, melee fighting was ineffective and superfluous, according to the strategic concepts of these armies. Prioritized speed over firepower and flawlessness. With limited margin for mistake, coordination fights were fought and won in a matter of minutes or seconds. Energy weapons efficiency eliminated the need for antiquated tools like blades, which were viewed as remnants of a past era and able to breach energy shields or resist plasma's unadulterated force. Discharges to use one in war would be suicidal or, they thought this way of thinking was so deeply embedded that most people thought that studying antique weapons was a specialized area that was only pursued by historians or collectors. Blades were only mentioned in the legends of their ancestors' warriors who engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Because depending more on strength and talent than on machines and algorithms, those tales were now seen as soldiers, and their reports were disregarded in favor of the digressions of hesitant troops or inaccurate surveillance records. But the rumors continued. More interactions were recorded, each more perplexing than the previous patrols. Zadja would disappear without a trace after an unidentified force destroyed their equipment, and survivors reported seeing flashes of movement, too quick to follow, then a chilly metallic sound, and then a gleam of steel tearing through combat armor and energy shields with unfathomable precision. For those who witnessed and survived, mentioned a human being who belonged to a species that was deemed inconsequential in the galaxy's overall size. Commander's skepticism gave way to anxiety. Could it really be that the superiority of galactic technology was tested by a rudimentary weapon in the hands of an Earthling? Humans were not a species. Attracted a lot of attention. Their home planet Earth was considered a little world with little galactic significance. Nobody with minds like theirs displayed them on the wide spaces of the galaxy to begin with, and it was especially unseen by order and intolerable galactic civilizations, until humanity was seen by honorable but unimpressive galactic civilizations. Being resilient and flexible, yet ultimately innocuous, this impression made the people even more perplexing reports. How could a species with such minimal power create a combatant with such abilities? The reaction was prompt, and meticulous military analysts were accomplishment deemed impossible by today's standards. Scans of the substance showed it was more than just a weapon. It had a density and composition that was impossible for current galactic technology to duplicate. Was a mystery. And some people speculated that the blade was improved with secret energy-based technology, yet no evidence of these changes was discovered. Some people thought, regardless of its origin, it was endowed with qualities specific to Earth's natural resources. In the hands of its wielder, it was evident that this sword was not a relic. A formidable force and a destructive instrument of strength and accuracy for the Galactic Army. The ramifications were problematic, since their theories did not account for such a danger. Commanders started training soldiers to fend against energy-based attacks, and not a single warrior used an antiquated weapon, to acknowledge that they may be confronted with something much more hazardous than they had expected. Not only a weapon, but a horrible approach to battle that they had confronted in many things before. Unable to readily counter as the instances fueled ongoing anxiety started to circulate around the ranks, the unidentified person became into a shadow that could not be. For the first time in decades, the cosmic armies encountered an adversary that compelled them to doubt their own supremacy and the idea of superiority based on sophisticated computing technology. This concern extended beyond the blade itself. However, it served as a reminder that advancement did not always mean that their entire way of life was in danger, imply letting go of the past, since often the most basic tools can be the most useful, especially in the hands of someone who saw their potential. In this instance, that someone was a person who defied the expectations of a whole galaxy, setting the stage for a conflict that would put not only technological limitations as well as the tenacity of an antiquated craft that the Galactic armies rejected as being out of date was turning out to be anything but as they readied themselves for the next conflicts. One question stood out above all others. The might of a human-wielded blade could not match the force of the advanced galaxy they were about to encounter. The human with the enigmatic blade and the galactic force's initial confrontations were distinguished by bewilderment and incredulity at the periphery of civilization, where there was little supervision. According to early reports, these encounters took place against the backdrop of skirmishes with rebel forces, a lone person showing up in the middle of combat, moving with incredible speed and accuracy, and carrying nothing more. Compared to what seemed to be a manufactured blade, this figure was capable of eliminating whole groups of highly skilled archery. Although there were few troops who survived, their testimonies were scary and consistent. At first, commanders were dubious and dismissed these stories as being fabricated or the result of panic. Soldiers who survived meetings with this person were frequently considered untrustworthy witnesses who were charged with giving in to fear. But as these reports gathered from many industries, it was impossible to overlook the descriptions of the weapon, which described a basic blade that was incredibly sharp, and its users. Combat style hinted to something much more significant than a random event that began as isolated legend. Analytic teams, and so defense commanders, had both their hands full the previous morning. Legends analytic teams examined the few war records that survived, and tales started to take shape. Experiences with this person, the fragmented video showed shocking information. The blade appeared to violate the rules of galactic warfare energy shields, despite not being a typical weapon, to disperse or deflect any physical object without providing any protection. Advanced with surgical precision, combat armor that was resistant to kinetic and plasma strikes was cut apart with each strike, provided intentionally, focusing on weaknesses that the majority of soldiers had never even thought about. What was most remarkable was how quickly and fluidly the wielder carried out these attacks. Moves that combined strength, agility, and strategy into one destructive form that seemed nearly difficult to follow. Futile endeavors were made to examine the sword itself, and in the few cases where pieces were found, they refused to be analyzed in any way, and the material composition was different from anything listed in galactic databases. It displayed no indications of covert scientific advancements or energy augmentation, but its edge persisted, immaculate even after extensive use, leaving scientists and engineers perplexed. Couldn't comprehend how a seemingly basic weapon might outperform the most sophisticated war equipment. In these early interactions fueled conjecture over the origins and capacities of humans. Humanity, renowned for galactic affairs, did not consider its resistance to be a serious danger to their technological advancement, was honorable but not remarkable, and their military might paled in comparison to more powerful and sophisticated species, which further complicated the creation of such a powerful individual. The theories ranged from some people whispered that the sword itself, an artifact of unknown origin, was the result of a human Aok experiment, maybe a remnant of a long-gone earthly civilization, having qualities that even people can use. They did not quite comprehend how the fame of the human soldiers increased so. Additionally, reports of soldiers who had encountered the blade started to circulate, causing terror among galactic forces. A sense of dread was created by the wildfire, and reports of the humans' fighting technique generated an image of relentless concentration and mastery. Each hit was intentional. Eventually, it became evident that the person was an expert in a field other than superior equipment. Combat discipline that the galactic civilizations had long since abandoned, which they lacked in technological might, but they made up for it with expertise, creativity, and a close knowledge of their weapon. The effect on galactic soldiers' mental health was immense. Soldiers who had been taught to rely on overwhelming technical superiority were outclassed by a single. People using what their teachers had taught them to believe was outdated were compelled by these experiences to confront their own weaknesses. Although their energy weapons were effective at close range, they were cumbersome. Their dependence on automated systems in close quarters left them unprepared for an adversary that operated outside the. For the first time in centuries, the galactic armies encountered predictable parameters of their algorithms, opponent they found difficult to classify or defeat, and this expanding legend also started to change the viewpoint of those who battled with the human rebel factions who were first dubious of the blade. The strategic advantage they provided to human presence on the battlefield was promptly realized by the wielding figure, became a representation of defiance and hope. And tales of their triumphs were told as evidence that even the blade, which had been written off as a relic, may now be used to confront more developed empires. Galactic authorities' response to the rallying cry for those seeking liberation from galactic oppression was heightened hostility by using elite units that were specially trained to handle the threat posed by humans. These units were outfitted with utilizing cutting-edge weaponry and flexible defense mechanisms intended to offset the blade's effectiveness. In spite of these efforts, humans still prevailed, and every victory only strengthened their reputation. The human reputation increased to the point where legend further undermined the morale of the opposing soldiers, point at which entire squads would flee at the sight of them, unwilling to confront what they now believe to be no other options, is so tremendous that most believe it created the human potential and the origins of the blade in order to be an unstoppable force. Increased intelligence agencies searched Earth's history documents for hints on this enigmatic fighting technique. They discovered allusions to traditional martial arts, disciplines developed over centuries that prioritized blade mastery, precision, and adaptability. While these practices were no longer common, even among people, and it became clear that people had not forgotten them. Warrior was the pinnacle of this age-old custom, perfected to a degree that could compete with the most sophisticated galactic authorities. Were disturbed by this revelation, which called into question the presumptions throughout ages on the connection between power and progress. They had thought that new technology had made ancient techniques outdated, but here was a person with a weapon that existed before their own civilizations, proving that advancement was not always linear, was not a relic. Rather, it served as a reminder that genuine mastery might go beyond the use of instruments. The legend of the human warriors went on to expand beyond the battlefield and into the galaxy's collective awareness, which started with his solitary study. Now that encounters had evolved into a movement, the sword was more than just a weapon. Despite the galactic armies, it is a representation of human ingenuity's continuing force and resistance tenacity. One thing was certain: they could no longer afford to keep looking for a means to eliminate this menace, reject the blade as a relic from the past because it had demonstrated its ability to be taken seriously by a person who has rewritten the rules of what was feasible in a galaxy dominated by technology. The human warrior's blade was more than just a weapon. It was a combination of ancient wisdom and unparalleled artistry. Galactic experts are eager to comprehend its amazing abilities. Explored the history of weapons and metalworking on Earth, design. They discovered a rich blade-making legacy that dates back thousands of years and is based on both necessity and artistry. Over generations, humankind has been forced to innovate in response to Earth's wars. Civilizations had honed their methods to produce blades that were remarkably resilient and sharpness in contrast to the Galactic Army's mass-produced energy weaponry. The sword seemed to be the result of Earth's smiths used painstaking forging techniques long before the advent of advanced technologies had perfected the control of metal complication and heat pressure in every facet of the process. The development of the blade, from its alloy to its edge geometry, was the result of years of research and sophistication. The weapon's capacity to sever? Advanced technology demonstrated this meticulous crafting. Materials. The Galactic engineers were shocked to discover that even their most sophisticated alloys were unable to endure the genetic changes expected from battle lovers. However, Blade's edge was more than simply its physical attributes that made it stand out, characteristics, but the martial traditions, which were based on flexibility and discipline, were the philosophy that influenced its application. Were based on the idea that learning to use a weapon as an extension of oneself meant that the blade was more than just a tool. It served as a representation of harmony between control and accuracy in galactic civilizations, where combat's warriors were trained with a foreign mindset that mainly focused on energy-based technology and automation, to rely on technology, relying on algorithms, to direct them. In contrast, mastery of the blade showed a completely different strategy that blended intuition with proficiency and a deep comprehension of the weaponry that galactic historians were fascinated by the relationship between Earth's martial arts and the effectiveness of the blades, and found that numerous human societies have created sword-based fighting techniques these days. Systems were based on tactics that took topography into consideration and placed more emphasis on physical skill than on technique. Human fighters' capacity to predict and take advantage of flaws in time and the psychology of their opponents. This training directly contributed to the Galactic Army's defenses. In contrast to energy-based weapons that prioritized efficiency, the blade required the inventiveness and flexibility that had been cultivated over many generations of use. The blade's seeming mystique also contributed significantly to its influence on galactic soldiers, was viewed with both wonder and terror, in part because of its unknown composition, as well as in part because of how they used the blade. Created a sense of invincibility by fusing science and legend, and troops talked quietly regarding its capacity to cut through energy shields, which shouldn't have been conceivable. Some people hypothesized that the blade had powers beyond science. It was either an item from a long-gone era or a remnant of old Earth magic. This idea of mysticism was not wholly unjustified, as Earth's past was full of Earth life too. Episode 7's legends were drawn from all over Earth life, including swords of the subject of several myths and legends, many of which give them supernatural characteristics. Sharp blades capable of piercing any armor, unbreakable swords, and weapons that choose their own users were prevalent in China. Despite being written down as fiction by today's standards, human folklore has an impact on how people in the view of those who approached Blade, the human warriors, appeared to represent these tales, transforming myth into reality. The Blade's reputation as a mystical force was further enhanced by galactic civilizations, by the sharp contrast with galactic energy weaponry and technology. For all they depended on steady energy outputs and accurate targeting systems, so power was predictable. However, the blade added a component of predictable physics and chaos. Its efficacy could not be determined by its physical characteristics alone. It was a weapon that flourished on unpredictability. Galactic leaders were unable to come up with plans to deal with an adversary. That went against their preconceived notions. About battle, The blade's distinctiveness also extended to its use in the larger story of human ingenuity, showed that advancement was not linear, rather cyclical, use of the past to confront current galactic challenges. As civilizations advanced, they abandoned outdated practices in favor of more modern, effective ones, like as the sword, but showed that the lessons learned from history could be equally as significant as the innovations of the future. Effectiveness served as a reminder that human warriors may innovate in a variety of ways, rather than as a rejection of development. Galactic societies were compelled to re-evaluate their reliance on technology after the blade's success, as it became evident that no possibility of fighting and blade might be replaced by a high level of mechanical sophistication. Yet the blade's strength was not limited to its physical characteristics, but also in the ability and attitude of its user. Galactic foremans who engaged in combat, forces trained to think in terms of systems and probability, were unprepared. The blade's philosophical ramifications expanded with intuition and inventiveness. It posed a threat to the basic basis of galactic civilizations outside of the fight, which had established its dominance by arguing that the only way to assess superiority was through technological innovation. The blade served as a reminder that one might accomplish what technology alone could not, by mastering one's self and one's tools. This insight led to a renewed interest in Earth's martial traditions and the ideals they stood for. The blade's influence extended beyond its immediate fighting effectiveness. It also came to represent tenacity and resistance, and the continuing strength of tradition, which served as a beacon of hope for those who battled with the human warrior. It served as a warning to all who confronted it that even the most developed empires may be overthrown. Weaknesses, a humble force that ultimately revealed the sword's legacy's technological limitations, was about striking a balance between the past and the future, between tradition and technology, and between talent and power. Stood as both the mythology and evidence of humanity's capacity to adapt and flourish in the face of insurmountable obstacles. The human warrior grew. So did the realization that advancement did not mean giving up. The sword was more than simply a weapon. It was a tool for figuring out how to incorporate the past into the difficulties of the present. The first lesson was that the galaxy will remember the human fighter's increasing reputation as an almost unstoppable force, caught the interest of groups seeking a competitive edge in their sport today. There was a little rebel alliance among these groups that fought the galactic enemy. Dispersed and underfunded resistance to repressive governments comparable to superior technology was first dubious about the stories of the person and the blade, but the rebels quickly realized that this person's decision to ally with the human was motivated by more than simply hope. However, the sword was more than just a weapon to the rebels. It was an opportunity to change the balance of power. The rebellion's approach changed when humans joined, and up to this time, the rebels had used guerrilla warfare and hit-and-run strategies to harass the enemy and sabotage supply lines. Outposts' resources were limited, and their technology was antiquated. Didn't have enough firepower to take on the Galactic Army directly, but gave their efforts a fresh perspective because the blade was more than simply a tangible weapon. It was psychological, because people were afraid of it because of its reputation. Galactic soldiers were hesitant, and the humans' sheer presence on the battlefield was enough to create chaos. This change was most noticeable during the crucial battle, as men battled to adjust to an adversary they could not foresee. War on Tarka 7, a strategically significant planet that provided the cosmic armies with a vital supply source. The leadership of the revolt had long aimed to interfere with operations there, but they lacked the resources to do so. Plans were developed to heavily infiltrate using the warriors' special skills after involvement altered the equation. The objective was not to destroy vital infrastructure and guarded installations. Victory, but in order to weaken the enemy's hold and provide chances for additional resistance. The outcomes were unprecedented, Galactic troops used to using superior firepower to defeat their adversaries were at a drawback. The human blade precisely sliced through armored troops and energy barriers, causing holes in defenses that the rebels took advantage of and commanders were not used to. Such strategies found it difficult to keep the peace, and what started as a skirmish became a rout, as the rebels were motivated by human achievement and panic swept through the ranks. Battled with newfound vigor, winning a battle that would not have been possible without their mysterious ally. For the first time, a significant galactic stronghold had been shaken by the aftermath of Terra's 7-cent shock. Waves. Succumbing to a force that was once inconsequential, the human warrior turned into an emblem of resistance that represents the potential to overcome even the most sophisticated civilizations. This triumph was a declaration rather than just a tactical one, demonstrated that despite their technical superiority, the galactic armies were not invincible. The triumph on Terra 7 demonstrated how human impact transcended the battlefield, encouraged other oppressed groups to rebel, knowing that insurrection was no longer a futile weapon. Originally written off as an anachronism, it became a symbol of rebellion. Rejecting the current quo challenges the notion that power in the galaxy was solely defined by technology. In areas where hope had long been lost, whispers of the human warrior ignited a spark of resistance. Seeing this expanding movement, the leaders of the Galactic Authority, who met to evaluate the consequences of human behavior and devised a reaction after realizing the danger was no longer limited to a single person, the effectiveness of the blade was. It was a weapon that defied not only its physical characteristics but also the ideology it stood for. Their knowledge of combat that challenges the fundamental tenets of their attempts to neutralize. Equipped with experimental technologies, the human intensified elite units were deployed. Strategies were developed to isolate and overwhelm. The human rejected the capabilities. The rebels the chance to take advantage of their ally advantages. However, in spite of these actions, the humans persisted in avoiding capture, hitting with accuracy and vanishing before help could reach them. Blade proved resistant to traditional defenses, and people's flexibility made them a difficult target. The rebellion's increasing fervor also presented fresh difficulties, and although human achievement had produced a legend, it had further put them at the heart of the dispute, and when their fame increased, so did the demands made of them. The blade turned into a symbol that symbolized the galaxy's worries and hopes, bore the load of innumerable battles. For the rebels, this was both a boon and a burden, but for the humans, deeds not only encouraged people to support their cause, but also made them the focus of unmatched galactic commanders are aware of the humans' destabilizing influence, started to modify their strategies, turning their attention from direct conflict to psychological warfare, propagandizing false information to lower the rebellion's spirits, portraying the person as a dangerous oddity that was out of place in a civilized society since it was a remnant of a violent past. Galaxy's efforts yielded conflicting outcomes, and some factions questioned the human techniques. Some adopted the blade as a warning that even the most highly developed technology posed a physical threat. It was possible to confront empires, but humans remained a mystery. Stayed out of the spotlight so that the sword could speak for itself. Their actions were well thought out, and their intentions were unclear. Leaders of rebellions conjectured about their actual motivations, questioning if the person fought for a cause or just employs. Regardless of their motivations, people's presence continued to influence the path out of a sense of personal duty. Of the battle as the rebellion gained momentum, the galaxy's power dynamics started to change. Its impact went beyond its physical limits, compelling the cosmic armies to face their own limitations. It showed the persistent force of skill and revealed weaknesses in their reliance on technology. The human warrior's tenacity and flexibility had elevated them beyond being a single person, a natural force that sparked transformation in a galaxy that had long thought of itself unassailable. The conflict was far from ended, but human activity had permanently changed the blade. and the blade that was once written off as a relic in galactic history had demonstrated its value in the most significant manner imaginable. It served as a reminder that advancement was not necessarily quantified in terms of technology, and that even the tiniest spark may start a revolution as the rebellion persisted in pursuing the galaxy's unquestionable truth. Will never be the same, since the impact of human warriors extended much beyond the battlefield. Their deeds and the blade's power changed how galactic civilizations perceived the advancement of warfare and the distribution of power. Humanity was formerly thought to be a minor species, became a symbol of tenacity, and earned a new degree of esteem throughout the galaxy. This flexibility compelled societies to reevaluate their conceptions of what strength and security looked like. For a long time, technological growth had characterized the galactic order's superiority, and civilizations measured their advancement by their capacity to capture energy, automate procedures, and create systems that required less human labor. This story was upended by humans and their blade, which showed that even the most advanced technologies had their limitations. When confronted with resolve and mastery skills, this insight resulted in a change in how societies viewed power. Many started to wonder if they had been overly reliant on their instruments, sacrificing what made them genuinely functional in the process. Following the rebellion, the blade became a cultural item that told tales of its effectiveness, dispersed around the galaxy, creating wonder and curiosity in academics and the military. By researching its history and customs, strategists attempted to comprehend its significance. Symbolized the resurgence of interest in the philosophy and art of blade fighting, which resulted in a renaissance of martial training initiatives. Civilizations that had given up on fighting with a knife started reintroducing it while using the ideas they had gained from the human warrior with their own techniques for hospitality. The blade came to symbolize humanity's newfound position in the galactic community and its capacity to develop, adapt, and flourish against insurmountable obstacles. Throughout Earth's history, and other civilizations started to admire customs that had previously been written down as remnants of a primitive past. Examining their own pasts and unearthing customs and ideas that had been disregarded in the quest for the blade had spurred a wider cultural shift as a result of technological advancement, reminding the galaxy of the importance of the human warrior's legacy and lessons from the past extended beyond. The blade compelled them to reconsider their allies among the interstellar armies. Commanders of military strategy and doctrine recognized that their dependence on automated and energy-based systems, training programs were redesigned to prioritize flexibility and adaptability after processes had produced weaknesses. Soldiers were urged to exercise critical thinking in order to have a greater comprehension of the principles of combat. Some factions even started experimenting with bladed weapons instead of depending just on their equipment, incorporating them into their arsenals to broaden their skill set. This change went further than galactic authorities. At the highest echelons of government, shocked by human success, were compelled to tackle the shortcomings of their power structure. Many started looking into the prospect of forming partnerships, with humanity's recognition of the possible advantages of cooperation through diplomatic approaches, was signed treaties and started cultural exchanges that gave humanity its own viewpoint. This method of problem-solving turned into a valuable skill in the cosmic arena. Originally regarded as a sign of resistance, the blade now functioned as a link between the two countries. Despite this newfound respect, the human warrior continued to be a mysterious figure. Following their involvement in the rebellion, they vanished from view, leaving the blade to continue their legacy. Some people theorized that they had chosen to dwell in seclusion after returning to Earth, which others thought they continued to battle covertly, affecting events in ways that were impossible to track down. The mystery of their story was further enhanced by the uncertainty surrounding their fate, which elevated them to the level of a folklore. The blade's legacy spread to places far from the battlefield. Tales served as a symbol for resiliency, balance, and triumph for artists, writers, and thinkers. Of skill, rather than force, it came to signify the human spirit. The notion that people could have an impact on the world even in the face of insurmountable obstacles. Statues and memorials honoring the human and their sword were placed around the galaxy as a reminder of the strength of tenacity and inventiveness. This cultural change had a significant effect on the younger baby blade narrative, sparked a new generation of thinkers throughout the galaxy, and pioneers who investigated methods to combine innovation and tradition in order to. Modern technology and traditional methods were merged to create solutions that combined the best aspects of each. This strategy produced innovations in a variety of domains, including engineering and governance, proving that human acts also prompted a deeper understanding of how the lessons learned from the past could guide the issues of the present. Considering the nature of cooperation and conflict, the sword, for all its effectiveness, was a tool, a way to achieve a goal. The weapon itself lacked power, but in the values it stood for. The human warrior's accomplishments demonstrated the significance of self-mastery, creativity, and flexibility, are traits that are frequently disregarded in the wake of destructive technological progress, became essential to how societies interacted. Obstacles assaulted by the sword acted as a reminder that learning, not learning, go of the past, was what progress was all about. The blade's impact on the forefront of galactic politics gradually diminished, but its teachings lasted. It continued to serve as a reminder of what was possible when people showed resiliency and adaptation. The story of the human warrior became part of galactic history because they refused to accept the constraints placed upon them. Taught in classrooms and commemorated during cultural events, but the details of their deeds were discussed and dramatized. But the primary takeaway from their journey stayed the same. Real power doesn't come from the instruments we use, but the attitude we have when using them. As the galaxy carried on the blade's tradition, kept influencing its future civilizations, which had previously disregarded humanity as unimportant and now desired their leadership, the human-initiated rebellion had established a precedent for opposing injustice and celebrating diversity. The blade narrative, despite its foundation in conflict, eventually turned into a story about perseverance, solidarity, and the enduring strength of tradition. It served as a warning that even it is impossible to undervalue the human spirit in a technologically driven galaxy.